Okay, now we know how we're going to do the study and what the study is going to be about. We are ready for session 2 in unit 1, and this session is on the place of ethics within the field of philosophy. Since ethics is part of the philosophy department or within the Department of Philosophy, we should begin with some understanding of what philosophy is all about and how the relationship of ethics is within the field of philosophy. Let me begin at this. Western philosophy began in 585 before the Common Era, BCE, at 6:18 in the afternoon. Well, now, how could we say that? Well, it was at that time that the Greek philosopher Thales predicted an eclipse of the sun that actually happened exactly as he had foretold. Now, Thales was a great philosopher. He believed that the world was composed only of water, and in that belief, he was not right. That's not correct. He did, however, turn human ways of thinking away from the mythical and the poetic expressions to the approach of using reason and logic and good thinking to seek an understanding of and knowledge about reality. He stopped using tradition and what people had always been told as true and began the process of using human reason and understanding to come to an understanding of how things were. The approach of Thales became the approach of philosophy. To understand the change in thinking from pre-philosophical to philosophical, we can look at Europe during the time that's called the Enlightenment. That's in the 16th, 17th centuries. Before the Enlightenment, which was a movement toward using reason and thinking to find truth, people began that truth rested in authority. Whatever an authority, the church, the government, the aristocracy, or even tradition told you was true, you were to believe it. The authority of that day, government and church, was telling people that the earth was in the center and the sun went around the earth. In philosophical thinking, people began to seek the source of truth in reason and technology. They began to think about things, to do experiments to find out what the truth was. In pre-philosophical thinking, humans were tied to authority. They served as serfs, just working on the farm for what the lord of the manor would give them. But in philosophical thinking, humans began to see themselves as persons who were important and who could seek their own destinies. They could make up their own minds about what they were to do and how valuable they were. Pre-philosophical thinking gave way to the idea of the divine right of the king. God had placed the king in charge, or government in charge, and to go against king or government was to go against God. This was a sinful thing. But in philosophical thinking, people began to say, oh, wait, government is created by the people and for the people's benefit. Citizens have a right, and those rights should be guarded by the government. In fact, some philosophers came to teach that if the government failed to protect the rights of the people, and that because these rights were unalienable, then the people had a right to rebel and bring down that government and set up another. This was enlarged by our Declaration of Independence to say that if the government failed to care for the people had not only the right but had the duty to take it down and farm another. Pre-philosophical thinking said the aristocracy had a right to their wealth and their way of living, and that the poorer people were just to accept what they could get. In the new thinking of philosophy, people were important. There was an equality of all people. The rights of the people to freedom and prosperity should be safeguarded, not just the rich. During the pre-philosophical period, the manorial system of economy was followed. One person, the lord of the manor, owned the land. He allowed the serfs, the peasants, to farm one little piece, but they had to give every bean they grew to the lord of the manor, and he decided to give back to them what they would have, and that's all they would have to live on. The new thinking came to industrialism. It was all right to have a capitalistic system in which you made things and sold them to others for what you could get the others to pay you for it. A new economic system came about. In the pre-philosophical thinking, human life centered in rural farms owned by the rich masters. But in the new thinking, life became centered in the factories and the skills of the people. It was a total change in thinking. It involved the importance of people, the rights of people, the use of human reason, the asking of questions, the seeking of answers, and believing in the answers that you found. Here's a little picture that sort of shows the feudal pyramid of power. The king, placed there by God, was at the top, owned the land. He would give a little bit of the land to the nobles, the aristocracy, for their support of him, and then they had the knights that were to be the army to maintain peace and agreement, following the rules, but always to support the nobles and the king. And down here at the bottom were the peasants, and what they did was they supplied the food and the service to support the hierarchy above them. Philosophy abolished this system, or at least controlled it, and brought about a new way of living. So what is philosophy? Philosophy is the pursuit of wisdom, understanding of how things ought to be. It's the love of knowledge, finding the truth about things rather than just accepting what you've always been told. Manuel Velasquez, in his book Philosophy, A Text with Readings, declares that philosophy is critically and carefully examining the reasons behind our most fundamental assumptions about ourselves and about the world around us. But notice, critically and carefully examining why we believe what we've always believed. This is what philosophy is. Now, philosophy, generally speaking, has 5 areas. There are those who take metaphysics and epistemology and ethics to be the 3 main, but I think we'll use these 5. Metaphysics is the study of the nature of reality. What is real? Does God exist? What are people free to do? Can we make up our own minds, or are we victims of determinism that makes things what they are without our being able to do anything about it? This is the beginning of physics. What is reality? what is real, what is the makeup of things. Epistemology is an area of philosophy that studies knowledge. What can we know? How do we know what is truth? How can we be sure that what we think is right is right? Now, ethics takes both of these areas and puts them to the task of studying what is right or wrong in the area of behavior conduct. It is the study of how we decide what the right decision about conduct is. It is using human reason to decide. We don't just have to do what we've always been told is right. We can use wisdom to decide what is right. The other two areas of philosophy, aesthetics and logic. Aesthetics is the study of beauty and art, and it tells us what is the nature of beauty. Logic is really the tool that philosophy uses in all the other ways of studying what correct reasoning is. Let's go just a little bit deeper with this. Metaphysics, a central branch of philosophy, deals with first principles. It asks what is the truth about concepts such as existing, being, knowing, cause, identity, time, space. This field considers the ultimate characteristics of reality and existence. It leads to questions about determinism and cause and creation. The term metaphysics comes from the title of a series of books by Aristotle, Ta Meta Ta Pusika. Actually, Aristotle himself didn't use the term metaphysics. It was assigned to the philosopher's writings about a century after Aristotle wrote them. Probably it was by a man named Andronicus of Rhodes. The meaning was after the physicals, and Andronicus took Aristotle's writings on science and then wrote after the sciences or after the physicals. Actually, Aristotle just considered these volumes to be first philosophy, meaning the concepts from which all philosophy stem. An example of metaphysical thinking comes from a man named William Paley and his concept of the divine watchmaker. In his work, Natural Theology, in 1802, Paley contended that if you found, or when you found, a functioning watch, it indicated the presence and work of an intelligent watchmaker. Now, Paley was thinking of a watch that used little wheels and springs, but the functioning of an orderly universe, said Paley, points to the existence and work of an intelligent creator, that is, one to whom Paley gave the name God. At this point, Paley's conclusion of the reality of deity is not our point. We're not studying that now. We're just looking at the process of using logic and reason to seek an answer to the question of deity. Epistemology is the quest to understand what is knowledge and how can we know what is right. Since Plato's study, Thetis, philosophers had accepted a traditional analysis of knowledge based on what's called JTB. That is, a matter was true if it passed the test of justified true belief. If all three conditions, justification, truth, and belief, were met on a particular claim, then philosophers said that knowledge of that claim must exist. In 1963, Edmund Gettier introduced what is known as the Gettier problem. He did it in a 3-page article. He suggested 2 other examples to the JTB idea that indicated that even if JTB was true, a claim could still not meet the claims of knowledge. Gettier used the story of Smith and Jones, who applied for a job. The president of the company told Smith, well, I'm going to give the job to Jones. Now, Smith knew that Jones had 10 coins in his pocket. Smith had counted them just briefly before. So Smith knew that, he said he knew that the one who got the job had 10 coins in his pocket. Unbeknownst to Smith, he also had 10 coins in his pocket, and they had changed their minds and was going to give the job to Smith. So while the statement that Jones would get the job and the one who got the job had 10 coins in his pocket were certain and passed the tests, it actually did not meet the standards of knowledge. Gettier at least made philosophy think, hey, we better think this over a little bit. Having completed the first part of session 2, it's now time for you to stop the video and complete session 1. This is going to be making some statements or some matching of statements to the 5 areas of philosophy. Once you complete assignment 1, then you will move on to the next video and the remainder of the assignments, that is assignments 2 and 3.